It all started with the sound of a coin dropping into a metal machine and a screen glowing in the darkness of a cheap hall. It was modest, even strange. No one could have imagined that a new culture was being born here, which would one day become a part of our lives. Back then, people didn't believe in it. They said, "Games? These are games for children. They're not serious. They'll be forgotten quickly." But there were people who stubbornly kept going. They worked nights, they faced distrust, they heard laughter at their address. And yet they didn't stop. Because they knew that where there is passion, something more than just entertainment is born. This story is about struggle and dream, about falls and ups. About developers who gave their heart to every line of code. About gamers who saw in virtual worlds the freedom that was missing in real life. About crises that seemed like the end, and about moments when a new beginning arose from the ashes. I want to tell this story to you the way you would tell your best friend. From the first arcades and small pixels to the stadiums where millions today watch the screens and cheer for their heroes. From distrust and contempt to global recognition. From, "They're just toys," to, "This is a culture that has united generations." And in the end, together we will find some simple but powerful lessons to take away from this journey. Because the history of video games is not just about machines and consoles. It's about you and me. About not giving up, about holding on to a dream, and about turning it into something great. It all started modestly. Not in big offices or corporations, but in small rooms where a few people twisted wires, soldered chips, and tried to assemble something that would at least light up on the screen. They had no plans to conquer the world. They just wanted to create a game. Small, but their own. Among the first was Nolan Bushnell, a young engineer who saw the future in simple entertainment. People said to him, "Nolan, this is not respectable. Who would play this kind of thing anyway?" He would simply reply, "People always want to play. It's in our nature." And he was right. His Pong, a primitive game with 2 platforms and a pixel ball, became a sensation. The arcades came alive. Teenagers, workers after their shift, even adults who had never played games before would come in. The rooms were filled with cigarette smoke, the smell of hot wire, and laughter. Games suddenly became a meeting place, a way to escape from everyday life. But at the same time, everything looked unreliable. Bushnell was rejected by investors, laughing in their faces, "This will disappear quickly. This is not a business." He had to convince people, take out loans, risk everything. He was not a millionaire. He was a dreamer, driven by doubts and distrust. And that was the magic of the beginning. Because the culture that would later change the world was born not from wealth, but from stubbornness. Every coin tossed into the machine was a vote of support. Every line of teenagers at Pong was proof, people believe in this dream. Back then, no one knew that games would become part of our identity. No one could have predicted esports stadiums or global franchises. But in small arcades, amidst the jingle of coins and laughter, a new culture was being born. And that's where it all started. The gaming world was growing rapidly. Arcades were multiplying, consoles were appearing in living rooms, companies were churning out new titles almost every week. It seemed like nothing could stop this wave. But that's when everything started to fall apart. In the early 80s, the market was drowning in its own success. There were too many games. The quality was falling, and the greed of the companies was growing. In stores, the shelves were bursting with cartridges, most of which were hastily assembled copies without a soul. People bought, and were disappointed. Trust began to melt. The symbol of this disaster was the game that was supposed to be a hit, E.T. the Extraterrestrial for Atari. It was made in a hurry in a few weeks, and the result was miserable. Players felt cheated. The cartridges did not sell. And legend has it that the company buried thousands of them in the New Mexico desert to hide the failure. The media tore the industry apart. Video games are dead, the newspapers wrote. Investors fled, stores refused to take stock, arcades closed one after another. For developers, it was like the end of the world. People who had been living the dream yesterday were left with nothing. And we felt it painfully. Because in every unsold cartridge, in every empty hall, there was not just a number, there was a broken hope. It felt as if our worlds, created with love, had been thrown into the trash. But it is always a crisis that tests true strength. Video games could have remained a short story, a fad that would have been forgotten. But they became something else. Because someone at that moment decided not to give up. And very soon a new hero was to regain the trust of millions and show that games can rise even from the ashes. When America said, "Games are dead," hope was being born in another corner of the world. Japan. There, a small company called Nintendo, which once produced cards for board games, decided to take a risk. And this decision would change everything. At the center of this story is Shigeru Miyamoto. A young designer who dreamed of creating worlds that you would want to return to again and again. He was not a businessman, he was an artist at heart. And it was his imagination that gave the world Mario, an ordinary plumber who jumped on brick blocks and saved the princess. A simple image, but it touched the hearts of millions. Nintendo did what seemed impossible. They restored trust. They introduced a strict quality standard, the famous Nintendo Seal of Quality. It was their symbolic gesture. We would no longer tolerate the chaos that had destroyed the industry. Every game now had to be thoughtful, interesting, and authentic. But the path was not easy. In the US, no one wanted to buy their console. Retailers were afraid of repeating the Atari failure. Nintendo had to resort to tricks. They sold their console as an entertainment system, adding a plastic robot and a light gun to the kit. It looked like a toy, but inside was a real revolution. And it worked. Kids believed in games again. Families gathered around the TV to spend evenings together. And Mario became a symbol not only of the company, but of an entire era. The world saw for the first time that video games could be a culture shared by everyone, from children to adults. This moment was a watershed. Where there was darkness and disappointment, a new world emerged, drawn in pixels. And we realized, games didn't just survive. They began a new chapter. In the late 80s, games ceased to be just children's entertainment. They became part of the home, part of identity. But with that, the first great war knocked on the door. Nintendo was back on top, but a new player appeared, Sega. They came not modestly, but with a challenge. Their advertising sounded sharp and brazen. Genesis does what Nintendo. It was not just marketing, it was a challenge to the entire culture. Sega wanted to take away older teenagers and young people, those who had already outgrown the childish Mario. Everything escalated into a real battle. In the stores, kids were arguing, "I'm with Nintendo." And "I'm with Sega." It wasn't just buying a console anymore. It was choosing a side, almost like a football team, like the flag you stand under. Sega brought its hero, Sonic, onto the stage. Fast, daring, energetic. He was created as the antithesis of Mario, not a slow plumber, but a blue hedgehog who rushed forward at breakneck speed. And the kids loved him. Meanwhile, Nintendo responded with its strength, a library of games that became legends, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Super Mario Bros. 3. They took their time, they relied on quality and long memory. The battle went beyond consoles. It was campaigns, advertising, loud statements at trade shows. These were the first real console wars, where each company fought not only for the market, but also for the hearts of gamers. And we, the gamers, felt it especially. Because for the first time, games became something that defined who you were. They stopped being a random hobby. They became part of our identity. This era demonstrated an important truth: competition makes everyone stronger. Nintendo and Sega pushed each other to grow, and the industry grew with them. And ahead of them lay a transformation that was unstoppable. We were living in a time when games suddenly stopped being just entertainment. There came a point when they began to compete with movies and music, and their influence was felt all over the world. It was the mid-90s, and the PlayStation arrived on the scene, a machine that turned the idea of what video games could be upside down. It brought with it something that had never been seen before, a true three-dimensional world that players could explore as if they had entered another dimension themselves. For the first time, we weren't just pushing buttons, we were living stories. We watched characters come to life in 3D, we felt drama that had previously only been seen in theaters. Final Fantasy VII made players cry, Metal Gear Solid showed that a game could be a complex cinematic thriller, Resident Evil gave us a sense of true horror, and Gran Turismo opened up a new level of realism. And it all happened in the hands of the player, right at home. PlayStation became a symbol of a generation. It changed culture, created a new language for communication between friends, united millions of people in a common experience. It gave us music, style, even fashion, which were born around games. And most importantly, it made games accessible not only to children, but also to adults. For the first time, games became a full-fledged part of mass culture, the same phenomenon as movies or television. It was a global breakthrough. The world of games reached a new level, and now we knew for sure, something even bigger, even deeper, even more massive was waiting for us ahead. The world was changing. Consoles remained, but now the internet had arrived, and gaming was no longer just a solitary adventure in the living room. Suddenly you could compete with someone thousands of miles away, you could find friends you'd never met in person, you could experience a real adrenaline rush. Esports was born gradually but surely. The first tournaments, which seemed to be held in modest halls, turned into huge stadiums with thousands of spectators. League of Legends, Dota 2, CS, Go, names that became symbols of a new culture, a new scene, where gamers became heroes, and fans, part of this world. But along with this, there were also dark sides. Studios worked in crunch, day and night, without rest, to release the game on time. Monetization became aggressive, microtransactions, loot boxes, which felt like a trap for players. The emergence of toxicity in communities showed that great success brings not only fame, but also pressure, problems and responsibility. For us gamers and developers, it was a time of testing. The world no longer perceived games as easy fun. They became serious, large-scale, global. And every step could lead to triumph or disaster. But it was these challenges that shaped a new generation of heroes, those who are ready to fight for quality, for emotions, for community. This milestone has shown that games are now more than code and pixels. They have become a cultural force that can unite, inspire, and even educate. And we are about to enter an era where this power will become even deeper, when virtual reality, metaverses, and innovation will transform not just games, but people's lives. Today, video games are not just entertainment. They have become a way of thinking, a way of uniting people and even creating new worlds. We see indie studios that give birth to true masterpieces, playing on emotions and stories where every pixel matters. And at the same time, large franchises that encompass global media, esports, and fan cultures around the world. Virtual reality and metaverses are here. People are walking around in digital cities, building homes, communicating, working, competing, and exploring new worlds that never existed before. And this is just the beginning. The future promises even more interactivity, even deeper emotions, even more powerful stories. But despite technology, the most important thing is people, those who create, those who play, those who believe in dreams. Because they are the ones who are able to turn challenges into opportunities. Every crisis, every failure, every game over, sooner or later becomes the start of a new level, a new era, a new culture. And now, as we look back on this journey, from small arcades to globally sports arenas and virtual universes, it becomes clear, the history of video games is the history of the human spirit. It is proof that if you believe, take risks and work, you can create something that will change the world.